Right, so today I want to bring something up that Thomas Sowell um, says, and he says one of the painful realities of our times is how long a political lie can survive even after being disproved for years or even generations. Now, again, there's many, many, many of these things, and I don't have notes or anything, so I'm obviously just talking off the top of my head. But I mean, you look at, Trump-Russia collusion, you look at climate change. I mean, you look at many of these kind of things, right? And that, I guess, climate change, the big one is that they've been making these grandiose predictions for going back to like the 1980s, and yet literally none of it has came true. They've been saying that the glaciers are going to melt every year for almost 20 years now, and yet they still haven't. Again, so it's just pure insanity. I mean, you bring up some other stuff too. You got the idea that the wealth gap and the gender pay gap, I think, is another really big one. Like there's just many. There's the um, poverty causes crime. There's many of these kind of fallacies that continue to live on. I mean, the only reason that the West is rich is because they stole from the third world, right? Like those are, like I said, those are just some stuff off the top of my head. But again, this is a massive problem in society right now, and why is it such a big problem? Is because I believe is because we have a mainstream media that's fueling the problem, right? Like take the debates for example, like the debate with Trump and with Biden. Um, Trump, anytime Trump said something the least bit off the wall, and again, I don't care which person you support, you don't support either, whatever. They didn't let Trump lie. They didn't even let Trump lie about stuff that they're sorry. They fact checked Trump on stuff that was true, right? So again, but when it came to Biden, they let him lie about many things. They let him lie about Antifa. Not only did they let him lie about it, he claimed that it didn't even exist, right? Even though it does exist, and they are incredibly violent. They brought up white supremacy with Trump, even though he has quotes going back to 2016. Even CNN reported it back in 2017 that he had condemned white supremacy. But again, they still believe the same garbage over and over again. They let Biden bring up the very fine people hoax, which was taken grossly out of context. They let Biden lie about the Green New Deal. They let Biden lie about many things, right? I mean, those are just three or four things off the top of my head. But again, did the media fact check him on it? Well, no, they didn't fact check him at all. So I think this is a big, massive issue because we have a mainstream media and social media as well that's so biased that it's not even funny. Like it's not even funny just how biased the mainstream media and their all their friends are. Like they let one side lie out of their teeth, and they don't let anyone else lie. Now it's not necessarily just a political thing, right? Too, right? It is oftentimes, like I say, the only reason the West is rich because they stole from the third world, right? Like, which is complete bunk. The stolen land, right? Like, Canada and the US, we stole the land. Like, no, it's complete bunk. You have smallpox blankets, you have all these just flat out lies from history that are still thought to be true by many people, even though they've been debunked for decades. So, I mean, a lot of them years, but a lot of them decades, right? So this is a massive problem in society, and like I say, I think the main thing that's driving it is we no longer have a mainstream media, and we no longer have. I mean, this is the other thing too. You talk to younger people, and they're like, "Oh, I don't watch the news, so therefore I'm exempt." No, like you're not exempt. Old people are brainwashed because older people are brainwashed because they believe anything they hear on TV, and young people are brainwashed because they believe anything they see on Facebook, right? Like it's just pure insanity. And here's the thing. Um, I think there's a pretty good argument to be made that Facebook and some of these social media outlets are every bit as biased, if not more biased, than the mainstream media is, right? And here's the thing, they'll make the same argument, oh, you right wingers believe everything you hear on Fox News. Well, no, that's not actually true. If you look at the polls, right wingers are more likely to be skeptical of what they hear on TV than the left. Like the polls are very clear on that. And not to mention, too, um, Fox's opinionated hosts are a lot more open and honest about it. You have people like Brian Stelter on CNN who perpetuates himself to be a fact-based, objective, news person, when in reality they're every bit as opinionated, if not more opinionated, than Tucker Carlson or Hannity, right? Like, if you look at Fox's actual, let's just straight report the news people, they're actually pretty moderate. They're about as moderate as they come. They're not overly biased. But this is the problem. Like I say, when it comes to CNN, you have people like Don Lemon and Brian Stelter who are, supposed to be, oh, we're objective and we're not biased, when in reality they're as biased as anyone. So that is a big, not to mention too, you have the whole social media aspect. You have all the big social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Google. I mean, Google obviously isn't social media, but there's, biggest search engine, right? They're every bit as biased as anyone on the media is, every bit as biased. And that is, I think, what's driving most of these kind of things, is because if you're someone who actually recognizes this kind of stuff, you come to a point where it's like, I have no idea who to trust. Like, anybody who doesn't have that, I mean, that's what I have, right? And I kind of decipher the fact that, okay, number one, how I figure out who to trust is, number one, I look back at things that people say, and, were they right? Were they right? Um, and not that that completely disqualifies them if they're wrong, but if they were wrong, do they admit it? That's the big one. Do people admit when they're wrong? And the mainstream media never does that, especially on the left. Like, does any of these big mainstream media outlets admit that Russia collusion was bunk? No. Did they ever admit that, oh yeah, we've been falsely accusing pretty much every right wing politician of being a racist, when in fact next to none of them actually are? No. Did they admit that the Kavanaugh thing was completely made up? No, they don't do that, right? So that is the big problem. And like I say, that I think that's what's driving this kind of stuff. And again, people wonder nowadays, why are things so polarized? Well, it's because people nowadays are I shouldn't say that. The people that are actually awake, too many of them are deathly afraid to admit reality. People are deathly afraid to admit reality. Most of these people are still pretending like, oh, both political sides are just as bad. They're both just as much of the problem, when in reality you have one political faction that is violently rioting, and not to mention too, it is not a fringe minority. Biden and Harris have literally used campaign money to bail out these violent rioters. You've had what, 50 people killed from these riots, and billions of dollars of damage, and most Democrats fully support it. Their argument is the Proud Boys. Okay, show me one example of the Proud Boys killing someone. Show me one example of the Proud Boys burning businesses down for no reason. Show me some examples. There may be some, but it's literally hundreds of times less than what is going on with Antifa and BLM, which the left are both fully on board on. Not universally, there's some exceptions, but the vast majority of Democrats are fully on board Antifa and BLM. They don't care how violent they are, they're on board. And that's what I'm simply pointing out, is that I don't think the right is perfect, not by any means. But they're not ones that are being incredibly violent. They're not the ones justifying violence for their political enemies or political opposition, right? The left is doing that. The left is pushing for far left crazy policies. The right isn't doing that. The right is as moderate as they've ever been. They've they've given in on almost every big issue the left wanted them to give in on going back 10 or 20 years. You look at, marijuana legalization, the majority of conservatives now support it. Gay marriage, the majority of conservatives now support it. Um, you look at the foreign policy, it is largely the left now that is big on starting a bunch of foreign wars. It's the Clinton, well, not the administration, but they were the ones that wanted to, gin up more wars with Russia and in the Middle East. Trump has clawed back a little bit, right? So, yeah, that's the big problem. The reason why things are so polarized nowadays is that you have one side that can do no wrong and they will never be called out for doing any wrong, and you have one side that can't, wear a crooked tie and not get viciously criticized for it. You can't simply disagree with them politically and not have them show up to your. I mean, you've had multiple Trump supporters' houses and businesses burned down. You've had more attacks than you can count. Like, at what point do we admit that things need to change, and they don't need to change for both sides, right? So, but again, I don't believe that's going to happen, because I believe that no matter what happens with the election, I think things are going to be more polarized. If Trump wins, the left is going to make up some conspiracy about how he cheated. Again, I guarantee it. And if he loses, it will probably be because the Democrats cheated. And not because I believe that universally. I just believe that Biden is an incredibly weak candidate, and I think the only way they can win is by cheating. And the fact that they want to force mail-in ballots, and not only that, a lot of these areas they want to remove signature verification. That's another thing they're pushing for. So again, I don't think they could make it more obvious that they want to cheat unless they literally came right out and said it. So that's why I think things are going to get worse. So, and not to mention too, Canada's the same boat, right? Like, Canada's the same boat. You have a liberal government that's ramping up, destroying Canada, um, and they're not losing any support. If anything, they're gaining support. They can have scandal after scandal, and it's not changing people's minds. Um, and not to mention too, I think it's dividing the right as well, because you have two factions on the right. You have the more conservative, we just oppose Trudeau, we just want to get Trudeau out, and we have the PPC or the Wexit kind of people that are like, yeah, I'm more principled than that. Um, and I mean, here's the thing when it comes to Trudeau as well, is that it's not Justin Trudeau that we're worried about. It's not Justin Trudeau. It's his ideas. And this is the problem, is that we can vote out Justin Trudeau, but if his ideas remain, or many of his ideas, we're not getting anywhere. Like, we're not getting anywhere. So that is the big problem, is that if we want to fix things, we have to get rid of the ideas. The individual politicians do not matter. So anyway, I'm going to leave a video there. If you'd like to, make sure you hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, especially. That's the big one. I'd appreciate the support on. But also BitChute and Parler. Those are kind of my backups to YouTube and Twitter. So anyway, if you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe, like I say, and stay tuned for more.